For months now, the controversial case of a black teenager who claims she was abducted and raped by a group of white men has held New York in its grip. Every day seems to have brought a new twist or turn. Today's was a stunning charge from a man who worked with the young woman's most outspoken supporters. Harold Dow reports.
2 days after Thanksgiving last year in Wappingers Falls, a small town in upstate New York, 15-year-old Tawana Brawley was found in a plastic bag. Her hair was cropped off, and the letters KKK and a racial slur were scrawled across her chest. She said she had been assaulted by 6 white men, and she had some startling information about one of them.
What's a cop?
He was a police officer?
Show me your bag.
7 months later, what happened to Tawana Brawley is still a mystery. Medical tests showed no evidence of rape. There have been no arrests, and the case turned into something of a racial powder keg. Brawley has been represented by lawyers Alton Maddox and C. Vernon Mason, along with civil rights activist Reverend Al Sharpton. Together, they refused to let the girl talk to authorities, instead charging that a black cannot get justice in New York State. They gained the support of such prominent people as Bill Cosby and Mike Tyson. But today, Perry McKinnon, a former aide to Reverend Sharpton, in an explosive interview with WCBS reporter Mike Taibbi, cast doubt on the story that Tawana Brawley and her advisors have been telling.
This whole situation is not about Tawana Brawley.
What's it about?
It's about Mason, Maddox, and Sharpton sort of taking over the town, so to speak.
Have they told you this?
Yeah. Their exact words were, we beat this, we will be the biggest niggas in New York.
WCBS asked McKinnon to take a lie detector test. An expert confirmed that McKinnon's story was true, including his warning to Alton Maddox that the facts did not support Tawana's claims.
He says, I'm not going to pursue it legally, I'm going to pursue it politically.
That's his answer.
I don't care about no facts.
Statements made by Mason, Maddox, and Sharpton seem to confirm that. These include a claim that an assistant district attorney was involved in the attack on Tawana, that the Irish Republican Army had ties to the case, and a comparison of the special prosecutor in the case, New York Attorney General Robert Abrams, to Hitler. When a grand jury investigating the case subpoenaed Tawana's mother, Glenda Brawley, Mason, Maddox, and Sharpton advised her to ignore it. Glenda Brawley was found in contempt of court and ordered to spend 30 days in jail. Mason, Maddox, and Sharpton convinced Tawana's mother to seek sanctuary in a church to avoid arrest and defied authorities to come and arrest her. McKinnon charged today that the 3 men had created a confrontational situation for a reason.
They're building all the makings of a riot. The weather's hot. There are a lot of young blacks out there, for one reason or other, that is deprived of the level of living that you and I have.
Today, there was reaction from the NAACP.
I'm saddened and angry that we've come to this point where people would use a young woman or use anyone in our community for their own ambition.
On a syndicated talk show, Sharpton refused to back away from the allegations.
We will never buckle and never bow. We will keep our promise.
Slander suits have already been threatened against Mason, Maddox, and Sharpton, and authorities may indeed begin looking into exactly what happened to all the thousands of dollars that came pouring in from all over the country to support Tawana Brawley's case. And late this afternoon, the Attorney General subpoenaed Perry McKinnon to tell his startling story before a grand jury. Charles?
Harold, thank you. Before we leave you, we have some further pictures.
3, 2, 1. What is your reaction to the statements made by Perry McKinnon today that this whole Tawana Brawley case is a pack of lies?
Well, I think it's unfortunate that a man loses his friendship and he, in a grudge, tries to hurt a case and a girl and a family that he doesn't even know. I think it's an unfortunate testimony to his character. I think one has to look at the facts. The fact of the matter is Mr. McKinnon lost his job. He had to resign from a hospital. He asked me could he and I do some security business together, which we were going to do. In the interim, he drove me and tried to get some private business off. It didn't happen. Around April, I said, you know, it's not going anywhere, and, you know, go on your own. Maybe he became bitter at being cast aside. I don't know. I certainly know that if one had a ping of conscience that they couldn't live with lies, what I read in the paper, then why did he go to the prosecutor? Why would he go to two reporters, one that we just threw out of the church who had who would have printed anything against us, and one that we've been boycotting on your station? Why did he go to Bob Abrams? So what I've done is I've telegrammed the Attorney General and said he ought to put this man in front of the grand jury. And I know that this man will not perjure himself and go to jail just because he's got a grudge against me and Alton Maddox.
You categorize him as a disgruntled former employee or former attempted associate, friend.
That's right.
He's listed as a top aide, or alleged to be a top aide of.
Listed where? Listed where?
He's reported to be a top
By
aide.
who? I mean, you got the president of the organization sitting here. You could call the board members. I mean, none of us have ever said that, and I told Mr. Pencheck that. I mean, who made him a top aide? Top aides don't ride people around. Top aides are in the office helping to conduct an organization. Top aide of what? What was his title? What was his responsibility? But let's get past that, Chris. Let's look at what he said. He said that Tawana's story is a lie. Well, what is Tawana's story? Tell him to tell you what the story is. He's never talked to Tawana about her story.
He said that the story of Tawana Brawley is the fact that there is no story.
Well, the fact of the matter is Tawana had told her story to you, or parts of her story, to you, to Ann Bollinger of the Post, and to the state police before Mason, Maddox, and I ever got involved. So is he saying that Tawana was lying for political reasons? Is now Tawana a political activist? We inherited the story. We didn't create the story.
The story, as related to me, was basically related in third person by Tawana's mother and her aunt, not by Tawana herself.
But it was not related by us. It was before we were on the scene. So for someone to say we fabricated a story that was firmly established when we got there shows they're lying from the outset. We did not originate this story. We came in after the story was established. Are they saying that Tawana's mother and aunt are political activists and have a political agenda? And is he saying that he talked to them and they told him the story? The answer to that is no. He's never talked to any of them about the story. He secondly says that he tried to present evidence to Alton Maddox, and Alton Maddox wasn't interested in it. Well, why does he present it to you? What is the evidence? You've got now the attention of Mike Taibbi. Give him the evidence that you have, Perry, because you don't have any evidence. This is why you're not with us, because you claim to be an investigator and you have no investigative information. And we want the grand jury to be able to ask him to present that to them or present it on Channel 2. If he has evidence, what is it?
Harry McKinnon said that he left the organization dissatisfied with where it was going and unhappy about what he called lies being told after he made his own investigation 3 weeks before Taibbi's investigation, which he felt established for him through contacts in Newburgh, New York, that Tawana Brawley, in fact, was in Newburgh during the time that she was allegedly missing.
Well, then he should present that evidence to the grand jury or you. Where is his evidence? Mike Taibbi's people recanted. Where's Perry McKinnon's people? I mean, this is ridiculous. Now, I guess the postman at my house will say, I saw Sharpton frowning this morning. They got trouble with the case. Make the man establish. If he has evidence 3 weeks before Taibbi's, where's the evidence?
So then how do you characterize the statements made by Mr. Perry McKinnon as of this moment?
As a begrudged, forsaken friend who had nothing but straws to reach for, and he knew two guys that would say anything anti-us, and he was right. They did it. I think they're going to put him in a very ticklish legal situation because he will be subpoenaed in front of the grand jury. He will not have evidence. He's never talked about the case to Tawana or her family, and he will unfortunately be exposed to having a fraudulent statement. And from what I knew, he was a nice guy, and I hate to see him get suckered in too far into this situation because, again, I have nothing against him, but I just don't think he should have misused a grudge against a girl that obviously has something to say. Again, if he has some evidence, present it. Don't talk about it, present it. He said Maddox wouldn't take it, Taibbi will. Give it to him. Give it to the grand jury. And if he's been a top aide, what was his job? What did he make? Nothing, because he wasn't a top aide to me. He was a guy that said, let's go in the security business and I'll drive you around while we try to do things. And it never came off the ground. It's just that simple.
There are pictures available of you and he walking together in which you, at one point, directed him to speak to Anna Phillips, and that picture is being shown shown today in Mike Taibbi's broadcast.
You spoke to 3 members of the Black Army and Reverend Porter coming here today. Are all of them my top aides? I mean, whoever's with me at that period of time, they're delegated certain responsibilities by the nature of the fact that they're with me. That doesn't make them a top aide. I've had a meeting at CBS recently, and I asked the lady in the hall where the men's room was outside of Roger Collins' office. Is she a top aide to Roger Collins? That could have been on film. I mean, let's be serious.
One final question, if I may. There are reports circulating around that day before yesterday you were in Kingston, New York, at the IBM credit union offices with Glenda Brawley, rather with one of the Brawley members, and you made a substantial deposit in the credit union funds, a deposit so large that it delayed the line at least 1 hour while the monies were being counted. Monies in excess of $500,000.
Out of all of the rumors that I've heard, this is the only one that I've stayed up all night praying was true, because that's how bad we need the money. In my wildest dreams, I can't remember it, but I hope we did it so we can go make a withdrawal.
There was another bombshell today in the celebrated case of Tawana Brawley, the New York State teenager who claims that she was abducted and raped by 6 white men. Richard Schlesinger has the latest.
Since she first made the charge, investigators have found no evidence to back up Brawley's claim, and she has refused to testify before a special grand jury. Attorneys Alton Maddox and C. Vernon Mason and Reverend Al Sharpton have charged this case proves the criminal justice system does not work for blacks. But last week, a close aide to Sharpton said the minister told him privately the charges were false. Today, a man who describes himself as a surveillance expert said he has tapes that prove Brawley's story is a hoax.
Not to be a kidnapping, but actually a 4-day party.
Samuel McLeese told WCBS TV reporters Mike Taibbi and Anna Phillips he was hired by Sharpton to bug Attorney Mason's home and office, along with Sharpton's own house, so Sharpton could protect himself if the case fell apart.
What did you consider to be the most damaging thing that they said?
This is bull, but it's too late. You know, when you hear words like that, then you know that it's all been a game, and the taxpayers that spent all their money for no reason whatsoever.
And everybody spent all their emotions and angst over this.
A political farce. Just for personal gain only.
Sharpton and the 2 lawyers have tried to make the Brawley case into the leading racial issue in New York State.
When Maddox, Mason, and Sharpton insist, as they have hundreds of times publicly, that they fully believe Tawana's story and they have evidence to prove it.
They're lying. It's an outright lie.
Well, Sharpton, Maddox, and Mason were all unavailable for comment on these latest charges. McLeese says he has already taken his information to federal authorities. So little by little, the Tawana Brawley case, which at one time threatened to polarize whites and blacks, is crumbling. Bob?
Thank you.
You ain't nothing but a phony, Sharpton. Hey, cool out. Cool that shit out. Cool that shit out, man. Hey, I said cool it out. Cool that shit out. You got that shit, you get out of here. Cool it out. Cool it out. Cool it out. I can talk what I want. Don't put your fingers in my face. My fingers in your face. Now what you going to do? We support you. Cool it out. Cool it out. The man's a phone. Just cool it out. The man's a phone.
Walked in the room and standing directly next to him is Tawana Brawley. She was the first person to walk into the room. Glenda Brawley is standing to the left of Reverend Al Sharpton. Attorney C. Vernon Mason is standing next to her. And you have her boyfriend, Al, who is standing next to Attorney Mason. Now, any second now, Reverend Al Sharpton is taking out out his statement. Now, of course, as you anticipated, you have about 15 television crews here covering this press conference. Everyone is waiting for and we don't know as of yet whether or not it's going to be. So, Gary, at this point, all we can do is wait and see what exactly is going to happen.
Good afternoon.
Now let's go for the podium. Reverend Al Sharpton has just against you.
On yesterday, a leak that constitutes a felony by law was printed in the New York Times. It is very strange to us that a paper that assumes such prestige would accommodate a felon to leak grand jury information and try to use that leak to discredit one that seeks justice. We have come today because we have an opportunity for once to challenge this judicial system, because unlike Eleanor Bumpus, Michael Stewart, Yvonne Smallwood, Nicholas Bartlett, and countless of others, God spared Tawana's life, and the grand jury cannot whitewash this with a felonious and false report. They raise overwhelming evidence and state none of it. They claim 100 witnesses went down. But we know some of the witnesses. One was Tawana's uncle. One was her cousin. One was Perry McKinnon. One possibly was Sam McLeese with the blank tapes. Certainly they were not overwhelming witnesses about a hoax. They claimed there could have been an accomplice that they couldn't name, nor say whether they went in front of the grand jury. It was a bunch of reckless speculations that was beneath the dignity of a porno magazine to print. No quotes from the investigators, just told that unnamed investigators existed, despite the fact that they suggested that maybe the bus driver hung out with Tawana. There's no recommendation he be indicted for statutory rape, despite the fact it questions the ambulance report that clearly stated to her family and advisors that she was tested and did not respond to even painful stimuli. They're not recommending that they be charged with perjury. We don't believe the grand jury believes itself. But what is more strange is if there is overwhelming evidence of a hoax, why didn't William Grady, the first DA, see that as overwhelming evidence? And why did he withdraw from the case with a conflict of interest? If there was no evidence, there was no conflict. Why did David Saul withdraw from the case? If there was no evidence, there was no conflict. And then, why aren't they under investigation for perpetrating a hoax? Then the question becomes, in August 15th, they asked for an extension of this grand jury. If this grand jury already had a glove found in a bag, already had overwhelming evidence, already had friends that could talk against Tawana, what did they need an extension for? Did they need time to put a glove in the bag? A glove that Grady didn't see? A glove that Saul didn't see? A glove that no one knew until now? It took 7 months to put a glove in a bag. It took 7 months for the FBI to analyze handwriting. You would have to be a fool or a racist or a combination of both to believe this leak. This grand jury, we hope, will end October 7th, because October 8th will be the beginning of the fight for Tawana Brawley. You underestimated us. You thought we'd give out. You thought we'd break up. You thought we'd back down. But we got tired of grand juries continually coming in saying nothing, no hoax, nothing is there. You called the Bumpers case a hoax. You called the Stewart case a hoax. So it didn't matter to us how many columns, Jared Nackman, you could write, because you've been writing them all along. It didn't matter how many editorials the Times could write, because we were fighting for our lives, and we have just begun to fight. But you showed the world how shameful you are, that you would take a young girl and try to discredit her and try to say in Emmett Till fashion, she did it to herself. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves, to call yourself journalists, to print stories with not one iota of evidence, and then turn around to her and say, prove us wrong. Where's your evidence? Where is the Times evidence? Give us one name of one witness that could establish that this was a hoax. If you put any of those witnesses on a stand and let Maddox or Mason cross-examine them, if they exist, they wouldn't stand for 5 minutes. For 8 months, you can get out of here if you interrupt me one more time. That's what you can do. For 8 months, I have been privileged to be involved in this case. I've been privileged to be an advisor and a spokesman for Tawana Brawley. I believe more now than before. Not only her story and her testimony, but the cause in which she represents. But today, I'm glad to have Tawana speak for herself. To you, today, to some of you, she is your hoax, but she is our daughter. She is your thorn in the side. She is our hope to change this system. She is a symbol of our cause. And in the name of those that died, that you also called a hoax. In the name of those that you covered up. In the name of those that you spat on their graves by questioning whether Eleanor Bumpers caused the cops to kill her, whether Michael Stewart caused the police to beat him to death. You degraded your right to objective choice by every time a black man or woman came to the bar of justice, you denied him justice. And now you want to know why your opinions don't matter to us? Because you've proven you're not big enough to get past the color of our skins. I give you our sister, Tawana Brawley.
My name is Tawana Brawley. I'm not a liar and I'm not crazy. I simply just want justice, and then I want to be left alone. My family and I saw that we couldn't get any justice, so we decided not to cooperate. We had no New York Times to leak to. So we got Alton H, C. Vernon Mason, and the Reverend Al Sharpton to fight for us. They, under extreme pressure, have done so. We have said that I would give full testimony to an impartial grand jury, and a congressional committee. Why won't they let me?
Don't worry about it. Don't, you just keep on going.
Mr. Abrams, you know the truth, and I know it too. Why don't you just step aside and let me speak to people who I know who will help me? I wish to thank God for sparing my life. He will see me through. I don't know the future, but I do know who holds it. He holds my hands, and he let me live to stop the cover-ups once and for all. I have not deceived my family, my advisors, and most of all, my people. I trust in God, and He will see me and my mom and my family through. Let's go.
Mason, you got one piece. You got one piece? Yeah, one piece. Sir. Let me say this, and then all questions and answers, as we indicated this morning, will be provided when Governor Cuomo, Bob Abrams, and Rudolph White Knight Giuliani answers our call to debate the racism in the criminal justice system. Those of you who have questions, come and hear us talk about the comparison between Carl Rowan and Bernard Goetz. Those of you who have questions to ask Tawana, we will answer all of those when Giuliani answers why he was going to make a deal with Samuel McLeese. Those of you who have questions, we will answer those when Bob Abrams tells you what he's been doing in the state of New York for the last several years as our people have been brutalized and killed. Those of you who have questions, you can even invite Koch to the debate, because as we said this morning on WLIB, we are going to have a full response to this felonious leak through the New York Times. One of those responses is going to occur tonight as we announce a massive action of civil disobedience at the Slave Theater near Bedford and Fulton Avenue at 7:30 p.m. You want to question our ethics? We will show you another level of ethics, because we do not intend to allow any more Tawana Brawleys in the state of New York. We do not intend to allow any more Eleanor Bumpers in the state of New York. Those of you who are journalists, why haven't you written some editorials on behalf of Carl T. Rowan? You know the answers as well as we do. You want answers to questions? Come to the debate. If these people will stop hiding behind secret grand juries like Bob Abrams does, tell your man who has never tried a criminal case to come to the debate. Anytime, any place, anywhere, any courtroom in D.C. or in New Jersey, we will meet them. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Al, the Brawley's going to be at the rally tonight. Why won't you answer any questions?
A teenager from upstate New York who says she was sexually assaulted by as many as 6 men last year today spoke publicly about the case for the first time. Appearing in Newark, New Jersey, Brawley responded to a grand jury report obtained by the New York Times, which alleged that Brawley's story was a hoax.
I'm not a liar and I'm not crazy. I simply just want justice, and then I want to be left alone. I have not deceived my family, my advisors, and most of all, my people.
The official grand jury report on the Brawley case is expected to be made public.
Ruling that Tawana Brawley lied about a vicious racial assault led to an angry demonstration by Brawley's supporters last night in New York City. It was led by the Reverend Al Sharpton, who advised Brawley not to cooperate with investigators and who says Brawley will speak out with reporters tomorrow in Chicago. Harold Dow has more.
Tawana Brawley's horrible story that she had been sexually assaulted by 6 white men over 4 days last November became an explosive racial issue. From the beginning, there were doubts about her story. Just last week, Brawley publicly insisted she was telling the truth.
I'm not a liar and I'm not crazy.
But now, a special grand jury in New York has concluded that Tawana lied about the entire story.
The grand jury found no evidence that a crime had been committed against Tawana Brawley, and it is returning no indictments.
The grand jury said there was no evidence that any sexual assault occurred, that Brawley herself was probably responsible for the feces-smeared condition in which she was found, that the racial slurs scrawled on her body were most likely written by Tawana herself. The grand jury's investigation was conducted without the cooperation of Tawana Brawley or her family, on the advice of attorneys C. Vernon Mason, Alton Maddox, and activist Reverend Al Sharpton. They accused authorities of engaging in a racially motivated cover-up and publicly implicated an assistant district attorney in the attack on Tawana without offering any proof. The grand jury report cleared the assistant DA, but it was these charges, among others, that led New York's Attorney General to call for an investigation of the two lawyers.
Their outrageous, irresponsible acts have increased the atmosphere of tension between the races, not only in New York, not only in Dutchess County, but throughout this nation.
Civil rights leaders and experts say the damage may be severe.
Race relations have been dampened and hurt across this nation because of what we've seen.
They have made it less likely that victims of racial bias in the criminal justice system will be heard in the future. They have disserved their cause.
And most agree that may be the real tragedy of the Tawana Brawley story. Harold Dow, CBS News, New York.
The Tawana Brawley case is making headlines again, this time with reported grand jury information that her story of being abducted and sexually attacked was fabricated. The story of the black teenager, which began 10 months ago, has raised questions about racial division in America. Here is some of the background of the Brawley case.
No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice!
It was a drama filled with the horrors of racial brutality. Tawana Brawley, a black teenager from Wappingers Falls, New York, was found last November in a plastic garbage bag. She was smeared with dog feces, covered with racial slurs. Brawley said she'd been abducted and raped by 6 white men, one supposedly a police officer.
Shut up.
He told you to shut up?
He's a cop.
He was a police officer?
Show me a bag.
She had KKK written across her chest and nigger across her stomach.
The story shocked the people in this sleepy upstate town, yet the racial tensions of nearby New York City made it all seem plausible. Fearing a return to the bad old days, prominent blacks from around the country rallied to her support.
Let Miss Brawley represent an example of what we're not going to stand for as parents, as Americans, and as human beings.
For many blacks, Tawana Brawley became a symbol of still simmering racial hatred. Led by Reverend Al Sharpton, her lawyers, Alton Maddox and C. Vernon Mason, charged police and even the governor with a cover-up in the investigation. They said Brawley couldn't get justice in a system insensitive to blacks. They told Tawana and her family not to talk to anyone.
If Tawana Brawley does not speak, if her mother, her stepfather do not speak, you probably will never know what really happened, and that's a terrible thing.
Her lawyers, according to former aides, decided at the beginning to pursue the case politically rather than legally. They brought the story of Tawana Brawley to the court of public opinion to be tried in the media. Ignoring a subpoena and defying contempt charges, Tawana's mother took refuge in a New York City church. The political drama disintegrated into a circus.
The fact that you've got 500 black people in this room and every one of us got a different complexion means that white rape is a reality in the United States.
Almost from the moment Tawana was found, there had been questions about her supposed 4-day ordeal. Allegations that she was actually at a series of wild parties, perhaps using drugs, maybe with an old boyfriend. Her lawyers tried to silence her accusers, charging them with racism.
I wonder would anyone ask, had it really happened, if she were not black?
Now, according to the New York Times, the grand jury has concluded Tawana and her backers were making up the story all along. Tawana and her family have since left the state, leaving behind the turmoil of this terrible story, leaving the jury of public opinion to wonder who, in fact, was the victim.
The Brawley family reportedly has left their new home in Virginia, loaded their van for a destination unknown. The Reverend Al Sharpton has said that Miss Brawley, her mother, and the attorneys would respond to these latest revealings sometime in the next 24 hours, and a news conference has been scheduled for this morning.
New York's Reverend Al Sharpton made headlines last year as the close advisor of Tawana Brawley, who'd claimed she was raped by a gang of white men and whose claims were later found to be false. Now, as Diane Diamond of WCBS TV tells us, Sharpton is back in the news, arrested for grand larceny.
Sharpton appeared in Manhattan criminal court and, with lawyer Alton Maddox at his side, heard the charges against him. They stem from Sharpton's national youth movement and his handling of its finances. The state says it investigated for 2 years.
The defendant used the name National Youth Movement Incorporated and the appearance of a legitimate charitable organization to solicit contributions, many of them in the thousands of dollars, from companies and individuals.
The prosecutor read out what he called scheme after scheme used by Sharpton to defraud money from contributors to his movement. He outlined how Sharpton falsified business records and committed several acts of grand larceny with movement money. What was Sharpton's plea?
The Attorney General is insane.
Mr. Sharpton, how do you plead? Not guilty, Judge.
And outside the courthouse, his flip response to this serious series of charges continued.
Are you guilty? It's my induction into the Activist Hall of Fame. They did this to King, they did it to Garvey, they did it to Powell. So I now have made it.
Look for a similar scene in Albany when Sharpton appears in court there on the income tax evasion charges. He claims his National Youth Movement is a charity. The state says he is guilty of failure to pay taxes on $300,000 youth movement dollars.
Black people owe no taxes. We ain't got no rights.
Attorney Maddox says the charges are clearly a vendetta by Attorney General Robert Abrams against Sharpton for Sharpton's participation in the Tawana Brawley controversy.
It is very clear here that Robert Abrams is trying to make a lot of hay out of this case. It will go nowhere.
For CBS News, I'm Diane Diamond, New York.
The Humane Society in Wichita, Kansas.
One of the things that has marked the civil rights movement in America has been the caliber of the men who have led it. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Roy Wilkins, Jesse Jackson. This man, the Reverend Al Sharpton, would seem an unlikely candidate to join that company. He, of course, would disagree. But to most white New Yorkers, and a sizable number of black New Yorkers as well, he is little more than a pudgy exhibitionist who can be counted on to show up, bullhorn in hand, at every racial incident. He says he's a lot more than that. Now he wants to take his act on the road, from the sidewalks of New York to the halls of Congress. Is he for real? Or is he just an opportunist whose act will wear thin before it wears out? You decide.
I give you our sister, Tawana Brawley.
The first time anybody outside New York heard of Al Sharpton was back in 1987. He was looking over the shoulder of a 16-year-old girl who claimed that 4 white men had raped her, smeared excrement on her, and carved the letters KKK on her chest.
My name is Tawana Brawley. I'm not a liar, and I'm not crazy.
But a grand jury disagreed. They found her allegations a hoax, and the Reverend Sharpton was blamed for irresponsibly exploiting Tawana Brawley to promote himself. Since the Brawley affair, Al Sharpton has been noisily promoting civil rights and promoting Al Sharpton, never far from lights, cameras, action.
No justice!
To many black New Yorkers, he's been their mouth for social change, for justice.
New York is going to have to deal with racists.
To others, black and white, he's just been a mouth.
You can get out of here if you interrupt me one more time. That's what you can do.
As we said, New Yorkers have strong feelings about it. Things seem to happen to him. If they don't, he seeks them out. But he insists that his flamboyant behavior is necessary if he's to get attention for what he's after.
You got to remember, you're competing with Broadway lights, the Statue of Liberty. New Yorkers have seen it all. And you've got to be dramatic enough in New York to get your point heard. And you don't have to compete with that in other cities.
So what you've done is shape your personality, you think. Your hair, your voice, your attitude, your jogging suit for your audience, which is basically a black audience.
Well, if you were raised by James Brown, Jesse Jackson, and Don King, you would be very much like Al Sharpton.
Now who are you and who am I before God?
This so-called boy wonder from Brooklyn has been preaching since he was 4 years old. Born into a middle-class family, his father walked out when he was 10, forcing his mother, his sister, and Al onto welfare. That same year, he was 10, he was ordained a Pentecostal minister. By the time he was a teenager, Al Sharpton was leading demonstrations. This one for Jesse Jackson's Operation Breadbasket in 1971.
We got to finance our own movements.
Today, he's president of something called the National Action Movement,
Whatever you got,
a tiny political group supported by donations from his followers that he hopes to build into a major civil rights organization.
Everybody, whatever you can do.
Give me an idea.
Brother Barnwell.
How do you think people perceive Al Sharpton? And when I say people, I mean black and white.
in the black community, you have several different views. You've got those that support me. You've got an element that feel I exaggerate situations, or I wait for something to happen and rush in, and that I exacerbate tensions. In the white community, you've got the same feeling.
In other words, on both sides, black and white, you agree that there are those who say Al Sharpton is a blabbermouth, a loudmouth, too flamboyant, or an agitator, a racist, a race baiter.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
All of those things.
Right.
And that's the price you pay, or that's the price you want to pay?
That's the price you pay. Because...
price you pay for what?
That's the price you pay for being someone that gets involved in a high-profile fight for things you believe in.
These dogs in Bensonhurst.
Example, the confrontation he got into in Bensonhurst, a mostly white, mostly Italian enclave in Brooklyn.
We will never, ever allow our people to be assaulted without coming back to the scene of the assault and letting people know that we will stand up for our people.
In the summer of 1989, after a black teenager was shot and killed by a mob of whites, Sharpton led demonstrations through the streets of Bensonhurst that lasted for weeks. Frequently, they turned ugly. Sharpton was always the center of attention. One day, he became the target.
The guy plunged through the crowd and stuck a knife in my chest. And at first, I didn't realize what happened. When I looked down, I saw this knife sticking out of my chest. And I grabbed it out, and when the air hit the wound, I fell down. And the next thing I know, I was in the back of a car being rushed to the hospital.
When he woke up after surgery, he asked to talk to his old mentor, Jesse Jackson. The two have known each other since Sharpton was a teenager.
One could see that something had happened, a kind of change in countenance. He knew he had had a brush with death. He had seen death face to face.
And it really came home to me that, you know, if you're going to die for something, you ought to make sure that it's more than some slogans and some loud talking, that you really get something done. And I made up in my mind that I was going to try to make a difference.
He had a longer-term contribution to make, because I detected at the root of things, Sharpton had a heart, and he had courage. He wanted to be somebody real bad.
That's what you really want. You want to be somebody real bad.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, he's not saying that. He's trying to help me understand this work in progress, who is Al Sharpton. Mm-hmm. And the question is, the tactics that you have used in the past, the change that seemed to take place perhaps on that hospital bed, and where you're heading from here.
I think sometimes you do things to get attention. You do things to get through the crowd to center stage. The real challenge is when you get center stage, do you have something to say?
Center stage last fall was the New York Democratic primary for a U.S. Senate seat. He ran against established Pauls who spent millions doing it. And in a bitter, ugly campaign, Sharpton showed up at the debates as the voice of reason.
My problem is I did not enter this race to just argue about someone's dirty linen.
He ran a clean, business-like campaign. Cost?
What's that?
Just $63,000. And he wound up with 14% of the vote statewide. The way these students at the Orange Middle School in New Jersey greeted him recently, you would have thought he'd won the race.
Got X on our caps and 0 in our brains.
He talked about things that most of these kids know about at first hand, violence and drugs. But he told them to stop finding excuses for themselves as victims of racism.
Well, Reverend, we got to get white. No, we got to get ourselves together. You woke up tomorrow morning, every white person was dead. If you didn't know government, you couldn't run nothing. If you woke up in the morning, everybody was dead, and you didn't know law, we still wouldn't have the right criminal justice system. You got to learn in order to lead. You got to be ready and prepared to take charge.
I think he's really for the people, cause if I was gonna get stabbed in the chest, I would have gave up. But you know he's here, so I'm for him.
Did he say things that were important to you?
Most definitely, yes.
What was the most important thing that you heard?
We have to concentrate on ourselves, bettering our community, stop the drugs, the violence, the crimes, and everything like that.
He says to stop killing each other, because that happens a lot.
I like when he said that nobody could stop you from dreaming.
Can I think of Al Sharpton along with Martin King and Malcolm X?
Yes. Yes.
You serious?
Most definitely.
Why?
He's great.
But even though these youngsters admire him, their doubts about that Tawana Brawley affair won't go away.
It seemed like it's obvious that the girl was lying to me. It was really obvious.
The girl was lying?
To me, yes.
And yet Al Sharpton
believed her, right?
Believed it, or was using her. What do you think?
At the time, I think he was using her.
Using her?
Right.
How do you mean?
Because at that time, he was popular and everything, but he wanted more publicity.
I don't even know who you are and I'm talking to you.
And that's what people can't forget. They believe that Sharpton exploited a 16-year-old girl's claim she had been raped. A claim that, as we said, is generally acknowledged to be a hoax. On a drive through Harlem, we asked him why he doesn't admit it. You believe that 4 white men raped her, smeared dog feces on her? You still believe that, or you're stuck with it and you just can't get off it?
It would be politically expedient for me to say that I believe Tawana, I was misused in some way, but I really believe something happened.
Sharpton may still believe it, but few others, black or white, do.
His mouth got him in trouble, but his inability to back down from it, given the position that he had taken, trapped him. The hardest thing in the world to say is, I was wrong. I made a mistake.
Pete Hamill, top editor at the New York Post, says in spite of Sharpton's past, he is now a political figure to contend with.
Sharpton articulates something in various ways that other people feel but can't quite articulate. So listening to that language, even though it's specifically local in New York, it's also what he's saying is applicable in every city in the United States that has a substantial black population.
Thank you.
If Al Sharpton is ever to be taken seriously as a politician or a national civil rights leader, first he has to make peace not just with white voters, but with middle-class blacks as well. The black bourgeoisie who are frequent targets of his sarcasm and ridicule at his weekly rally broadcast on radio.
I went to one of these highfalutin big Negro affairs. How are you, Reverend? Well, here's my card. Call me sometime. Call you about what? We got unemployment in Harlem, Bed-Stuy, Southside Chicago, West LA. Can you hire kids at your corporation? Well, no. We got people in jail as innocent. Can you help free them? Well, no. We got children with low self-esteem. Can you preach pride to them? Well, no. Well, call you about what? We're not impressed with your title. Let your actions speak for yourself.
In your radio address last Saturday, you really took off with the black middle class. What you're saying is, in effect, you've made it and you've left your brothers and sisters behind.
That's right. I think that many of those in the black professionals have just as much reason to be condemned as in the broader white society. I do not feel, as I did 10 years ago, that just white racism is the problem.
So here's a new Al Sharpton telling his constituents what they don't want to hear, telling these inmates at New York's Rikers Island to take responsibility for their actions, including the children many of them have fathered and abandoned.
Too many of us walk away from our kids like we just had a bowel movement and keep stepping.
Get your act together, he tells these men.
And there's nothing more sick and nothing more irrelevant than an old thug. Well, that guy's you 20 years from now, unless you decide to be different.
Sharpton was in the news again just this past Friday when he showed up at court and turned himself in to begin serving time for the crime of civil disobedience for a demonstration called the Day of Outrage he organized in 1987 that gridlocked Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn.
God bless you, y'all.
Thank you, sir.
God bless you.
He is scheduled to serve 45 days in jail.
Jail is not an unexpected stop. I decided a long time ago, whatever price we pay, I'm going through. I'll pay the price.
It is 20 minutes after the hour. A former prosecutor is celebrating a personal legal victory this morning with a case that polarized race relations in New York. Randall Pinkston reports.
I feel good. I feel very good.
For Stephen Pagonis, a former county prosecutor in upstate New York, the verdict was sweet vindication. He had sued 3 controversial civil rights activists who claimed that Pagonis was one of the men who assaulted a black teenager a decade ago. Late Monday, the jury found all 3 activists liable for defamation.
You know, what Mason, Maddox, and Sharpton did hurt a lot of people. They hurt a lot of people. They hurt race relations.
It was November 1987 when Tawana Brawley was found with feces and racial slogans smeared on her body. She claimed she was sexually attacked by a group of white men. Her advisors, Alton Maddox, C. Vernon Mason, and Sharpton, mounted a racially charged campaign, accusing Pagonis of being part of the alleged attack and cover-up. Those public accusations became evidence in this 8-month trial.
We are saying Stephen Pagonis did it.
While a grand jury ruled the Brawley case was a hoax, Pagonis filed the lawsuit, he said, to clear his name. But the defendants are claiming victory because they were cleared of many of the accusations.
It is a contradictory verdict, and at that is only a partial verdict against us. Conspiracy was the thing that was most explosive, and they rejected that.
For Pagonis, the victory is bittersweet.
And you know what? It really saddens me. So we won, but you know, it just upsets me. It's been a long 10 years.
Today, a jury decides how much to award Stephen Pagonis. He is asking for $400 million from the 3 defendants. But with Mason and Maddox disbarred from law and no regular job for Sharpton, it's unclear how much Pagonis will ever collect. Randall Pinkston, CBS News, New York.
In this morning's medical report.